Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is the debate of the Scottsdale City mayoral candidates, and we're delighted that you're all here to join. Before we get started, I'd like to make sure everybody is aware of these ground rules. I know that the candidates have been given instructions on ground rules. This is for the audience. As you come in, please mute yourself. You will be muted by the host, which is myself. Also chat as much as people would like to be able to talk to each other. Our league rules require that we need to keep the chat only between the attendees and the host, as it would be if you were in a venue. For example, the use of the chat, should it be used to promote any candidate campaign, is not allowed in our guidelines. You have to treat this particular venue as it would if you were in an actual theater or an audience or in a physical space where we would not permit signs, nor would we permit candidate information inside the auditorium. And for that reason, we have disabled the chat between individuals and only allowed for the chat if you have questions to the host. We appreciate your consideration of this. Before we get started, I would like to remind everybody that we are live on Facebook and the event is being recorded as a backup. As we all know, technology always seems to fail us when we least expect it. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is Sunday, June 28th, and we're delighted that you are here to join us at the Scottsdale City Council mayoral debate. This debate is organized by the League of Women Voters and co-sponsored by the National Council of Jewish Women, Arizona. I would like to do a very special call out to the vice president, the senior vice president of the National Council of Jewish Women, Arizona, Carol Consalvo, who was very instrumental in helping us pull this event together. I am Penny Sharon, a member of the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Phoenix, president-elect of the board, and a member of the League of Women Voters of Arizona State Board. Democracy is not a spectator sport, though today it might seem that way, since all you get to do is listen to the candidates and you don't get to jump into the fray and ask them questions directly. This venue has not permitted us to allow for much of that interaction. Prior to this event, as we publicized it, we asked people to submit questions to us, and I'll explain that a little further. So I thank you all for taking the time to become informed voters and stay engaged in our democracy. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We envision a democracy where every citizen is registered, informed on all candidates and issues, and votes. Toward that end, since 1920, the League has provided education and advocacy on issues of the day. Our mission is to register citizens to vote, to advocate for League-adopted policies, and to educate voters. Celebrating our centennial this year on February 14th, we continue our work of the past 100 years as a nonpartisan activism grassroots organization that believes voters should play a critical role in democracy. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any political candidate or party, but we do advocate for issues that have been studied and adopted by the members of the League. Leagues across the country host debates to provide voters the opportunity to hear from the candidates on important issues, and is a trusted voice in providing fair representation of issues and opportunities for candidates. The purpose of today's forum is to provide you the opportunity to learn more about the candidates for the Scottsdale City Mayor's office and to make an informed vote. All promotional information for the debate included the opportunity for Scottsdale residents to submit questions. A team of league members reviewed the questions and determined the final list of questions that will be asked in today's debate. Listen carefully to the questions and responses so that you will know who and what you're voting for in this election. Today's debate will be ably moderated by Julie Gunnigle. Julie Gunnigle is a local attorney and a small business owner who was raised and educated in Scottsdale. She served Cook County in Chicago as a prosecutor of financial crime and public corruption. She is the daughter of a retired Scottsdale Unified School District teacher and has worked tirelessly as the former president of the Arizona Association for Gifted and Talented to improve education in our cities. Julie sponsors and coaches mock trial and speech and debate programs in our community. Please give a warm welcome to Julie. And before you do that, I would like all of you to familiarize yourself with the following. In your controls, there should be a feature called reactions. If you like what the candidates say or what the moderator is going to say, please clap your hand. It'll be a silent clap, what we'd like to acknowledge as we go along. I'd also like to be able to ask the candidates themselves to manage their mute, because what happens is if it picks up noise, it will put your face instead of the face of the candidate who's currently speaking. So we'd really appreciate, but be ready to unmute on time so you get your full time in order to participate in this event. Julie, I will stop the screen share so you may introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome to the debate for the candidates for the mayor of Scottsdale. The city of Scottsdale is going to hold a nonpartisan primary election on Tuesday, August 4th, 2020, for the purpose of electing a mayor and 3 council members. A general election shall be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 to fill any elected offices that remain unfilled after the primary election. To be elected at the primary election, a candidate must receive a majority of all of the legal votes cast in that candidate's race. There are 5 candidates for mayor seeking your vote for this position. The purpose of this debate is for the members of the audience to hear from these candidates on why they would be the best choice for the mayor of Scottsdale. Our goals for this forum are fairness, civility, and engagement. Penny Chiron will be our timekeeper for this afternoon. So candidates, when your time has finished, you will hear a chime and you may briefly finish your sentence. Because we are on Zoom, if you continue to use more than a few seconds of additional time, your mic will be cut, but do not worry, your audience will forgive you. Finally, I need to review the agreed guidelines for this debate. The moderator's role is to manage the debate fairly for all of the candidates and their audience and to keep the discussion moving forward. Introductions will be read in reverse alphabetical order, and the questions will rotate such that the same candidate is neither the first nor the last to be called on. Closing remarks will be in alphabetical order by last name. The candidates have all agreed in advance to be courteous and respectful of each other's points of view, refrain from interrupting one another, and avoid personal attacks. As moderator, I do reserve the right to pause the debate and cut question time short to remind us all of these guidelines. This afternoon's program is in 4 parts. We will begin with candidates' introductions, followed by 3 rounds of prepared questions, followed by a round of 2-minute grab bag questions, and concluding with a final closing question. So it is my pleasure to kick us off with opening remarks. I will read the 30-second introduction that each candidate submitted or that we obtained from each candidate's web page. And then following our prearranged order, each candidate will be given 90 seconds for opening remarks to tell us why that candidate should get our vote. Starting first with David Ortega. Mr. Ortega has worked for over 41 years in Scottsdale as an architect in the private sector. He states his experience is pro-development and that Scottsdale pro-development respects our Western heritage, honors mountain vistas, and favors low density, whether Old Town or near the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. When he served as city councilman from 2000 to 2004, he helped to craft the last successful general plan at 2001, which the voters approved. The general plan was developed with citywide input from Sonoran Hills to Pinnacle Peak, to the Scottsdale Airport, Old Town, and the McDowell Corridor. As mayor, listening and building consensus will be his priorities to craft General Plan 2035, which will be written and finalized in 2020-2021. Please welcome Mr. Ortega. Mr. Ortega, the floor is yours.
Well, hello, and thank you, National Council of Jewish Women and League of Women Voters. Well, hello, I'm Dave Ortega. I came to Scottsdale when I was 23 to work as an apprentice architect for Benny Gonzalez. I was lucky. I fell in love and I married Rosemary Gannon. We bought our house near Saguaro High in the neighborhood where she grew up. We were blessed with 2 children who loved Scottsdale schools and their neighborhood friends. In 1984, I opened my architect office in downtown. I have worked with literally hundreds of small businesses and global clients based in Scottsdale to grow their success. I gave my services to the Chrysalis Shelter for victims of domestic violence, and I worked with Mayor Drinkwater to locate, design, and build the Chrysalis Shelter in Scottsdale. As a parent, I worked on the task force with businesses, Scottsdale schools, the city, and Scottsdale Community College to confront racism and discrimination. We founded the Erase Hate Dialogue program to promote social justice and equal rights for all. As mayor, I will collaborate and restart the dialogue. In my 41 years, one highlight was taking the oath of office to serve as city councilman. And as stated in my bio, I am the only candidate, the only mayor candidate and the only council candidate with the experience of dialoguing with the community to establish a general plan or vision for the city. It's not optional, it's required and mandated in our charter. One of the situations that we have today is that the general plan is 10 years past due. As I said, I'm not trying to dig on the opponents, but the reason I'm saying this is because failure to have a general plan has disrupted and caused quite a few of the problems in our city today. I hear a chime, and I'm not sure whether that chime means I should stop or where it's coming from. So it's a little disrupting, and I apologize. Is that the perhaps everyone can hear that. May I request a clarification on that?
Yes, please. That is the chime.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Thank you so
Ortega.
much.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega.
Sorry, Julie.
Next up, Bob Littlefield. Mr. Littlefield has been a Scottsdale resident for 40 years. With his wife, Kathy, they have raised 2 children. Mr. Littlefield is a Vietnam combat veteran. Bob has been active in the Scottsdale government, serving on many city committees, such as budget, water issues, audit, economic development, task force of the Scottsdale Unified School District, and city council. Additionally, Mr. Littlefield is a representative on several regional task forces and committees. Mr. Littlefield has a BS in engineering from Arizona State University. Mr. Littlefield is the founder and president of Scottsdale-based computer company Net Expert Systems, Inc. Please welcome Mr. Bob Littlefield. Sir, you are still muted.
We'll give Mr. Littlefield a second to unmute.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Littlefield.
All right, thank you. How much time for the intro?
90 seconds.
Okay, good. All right, well, my name is Bob Littlefield. I'm asking for your vote for Scottsdale Mayor in the August 4th city election. The 2023 campaign for mayor is like no other in the history of Scottsdale. In addition to all the other controversial issues that we now have COVID-19, which has stressed our economy and our personal lives. Then on top of that, we now have riots and looting and all the other controversies, none of which any of us anticipated back in January when this campaign started. So while Scottsdale's special character and high quality of life will continue to be a big issue, the overriding issues are going to be public safety and finance, because of course the current crisis has a lot to do with hurting our city's finances too. So the overriding issue is going to be who is best qualified to lead Scottsdale through the turbulent times ahead. And I submit that I am that candidate. As the young lady who gave me the intro said, I served 3 terms on the Scottsdale City Council. I was on the Budget Committee, the Economic Development Subcommittee, the Audit Committee. So I know how municipal finance and economic development works, and I have the knowledge about those subjects to hit the ground running in January when the new mayor takes over. Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Next, Virginia Korte. Ms. Korte is a native of Phoenix, Arizona, and received her BS and MS in biology at Northern Arizona University. Korte is principal of Korte Group, LLC, a property management and outdoor consulting firm. Ms. Korte is serving her 2nd term as council member on the Scottsdale City Council, elected by the citizens of Scottsdale in 2013 and re-elected in 2016. In 2002, served as president CEO for the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce. Past community service includes serving on the boards of the Desert Botanical Garden, Scottsdale Leadership, DC Ranch Community Foundation, City of Scottsdale McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission. In 1992, Korte was elected by the citizens of Maricopa County to serve on the board of directors for the Central Arizona Water Conservation District that governs the Central Arizona Project. Please welcome Ms. Virginia Korte. Ms. Korte, you're still muted.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining today. I am Virginia Korte, candidate for the mayor of Scottsdale. As a 2nd generation Arizona native and a 33-year resident of Scottsdale, I am uniquely qualified for this position. And due to my extensive business, education, and nonprofit CEO positions, as well as my community volunteerism and leadership experiences, I possess the depth of knowledge and expertise to serve as your next mayor. I am a preserve pioneer, one of 12 original advocates for our McDowell Sonoran Preserve. I'm an education advocate who knows well the precious connection between a healthy community and excellent schools. I serve on the Scottsdale City Council for the last 7.5 years as your voice for fiscal conservatism and low taxes. Scottsdale is home to diverse regions that define our character and make our quality of life vibrant. A vote for Virginia Korte to be your next mayor is a vote for a strong and affirming leadership that will ensure Scottsdale's bright future. And finally, I am honored to be the only mayoral candidate endorsed by our brave men and women in public safety. Both United Scottsdale firefighters and police officers of Scottsdale have endorsed me, and I'm very honored for that. Join them in supporting me, Virginia Korte, for mayor of Scottsdale. And my webpage is kortescottsdale.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. Suzanne Klapp. Mrs. Klapp is a candidate for mayor after serving for 12 years on the Scottsdale City Council. A businesswoman spanning over 40 years, Suzanne ran a retail business in Scottsdale for about 20 years until she sold the business in 2017. She was the chairman of the council's audit subcommittee a member of the Capital Improvement Projects Subcommittee, and is currently the chairman of Economic Development Subcommittee. She was the chairman of Valley Metro RPTA, which operates public transit in the Valley. Please welcome Suzanne Klapp.
Well, thank you so much for all of you who are involved in putting this together. I think this is exceptionally important in the election process to let voters know who we are. And I should add that I was able to watch the candidate debate yesterday among the council candidates. And I will say that that I was really impressed by all the candidates. It's great to hear what they have to say. So I think you need to think about that. It's important that a mayor be able to work with whomever is elected to the council. And based on my track record, I can very much work positively and proactively with anyone who is elected to the city council in January. That's part of my accomplishment of being on the council for 12 years, is my ability to work with other people. So I have the best track record for pursuing unity and providing leadership on the council of anyone in this race. And you can depend on me to continue to do that, as I would be and am a positive force as your mayor. So I'd like to just illustrate three things. I was supportive of all three ballot measures that have been approved by voters in the last couple of years. That means that we got transportation projects funded. We got 58 capital projects funded through bond measures. And we also were able to pass a referendum, an initiative, I guess you call it, where the voters asked that we did not develop in the preserve, and I supported that. So what that all means is that we've been successful in providing a lot of things for the city over the last few years that I've supported, and we whittled down the projected $800 million worth of capital needs that were discussed a few years ago to what the treasurer now says is $127 million worth of capital needs. So we dropped that dramatically, and I feel good about my accomplishment in making that happen, and I'll continue to do that in the future. So if you want more information about me, please look at my website, SuzanneKlapp.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Klapp. Lisa Borowsky. Ms. Lisa Borowsky is a Valley native and lifelong Scottsdale resident. Her family moved to North Scottsdale in the mid-70s to pursue their passion for horses and the Western lifestyle. Lisa graduated from ASU and went on to earn her Juris Doctor from St. John's University School of Law in New York. She has been a licensed Arizona attorney since 1995 and has primarily focused in the area of commercial litigation, homeowner association law, and general business. Lisa is actively involved in her community, serving on numerous boards and committees, including the Scottsdale Convention and Visitors Bureau Board of Directors, the City of Scottsdale Audit Committee, the City of Scottsdale Water Subcommittee, and the City of Scottsdale Westworld Subcommittee. She served on Scottsdale City Council from 2009 to 2013. Please welcome Ms. Lisa Borowsky.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you to everyone that's participating today. I certainly appreciate your time on this Sunday afternoon. As Julie outlined, I'm a native, lifelong Scottsdale resident, and have enjoyed living in Scottsdale for a very long time. I own my law firm and operate that here in Scottsdale. And I served on the city council, as Julie just stated. Some of the highlights during my term there, which was one term, were that I led the charge to transition the city treasurer from that of reporting to the city manager to an independent charter officer. And I did that, I believed in that, and that was done as the result of creating more transparency and accountability, which I think is key. It was key. It was a key corner of my campaign back then, and it's a key element in my campaign now for mayor. I believe that we need to bring back more accountability, more transparency, and just really have that as the goal for the city. I entered the race because I think Scottsdale's lost its way. I think there have been approvals for primarily on the development front, which people are very dissatisfied with. And as part of my platform, I will demand higher development standards moving forward. And I'll get into the rest of my platform as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. So moving then to part 2 of our program this afternoon, prepared questions. The League of Women Voters have 5 questions prepared for each candidate to answer this afternoon. Each candidate will have 1 minute per question, and when deemed appropriate, a 30-second rebuttal to another candidate may be offered by the moderator. So with that, we turn to question 1. Question 1, with the reported increase of COVID-19 cases in Arizona, what are your specific plans for Scottsdale to establish and enforce community guidelines for residents to behave responsibly to reduce the health crisis, in addition to the council helping businesses cope with the economic impact? For question 1, we will turn first to Mr. Littlefield. Mr. Littlefield, the floor is yours.
There we go. Got that unmuted there. So far, the response at all levels of government in Arizona to the COVID-19 pandemic has been pretty pathetic. Arizona now has a huge rise in cases. It's gotten so bad that other states are quarantining Arizona residents coming here. We tried a lockdown. That didn't work very well. It worked somewhat to keep infections low, but the social and economic cost was unsustainable. Now we're going to try masks. I think we need some new ideas. And one of the new ideas I think we need is that I talked to someone at ASU the other day. They have a new testing regimen that Doug Ducey originally didn't want to fund, but I understand now under pressure from all the public saying that his response was not so good, he's going to go ahead and fund this. So I think this gives us some hope, but we need to try something different. So far, what we've been trying hasn't worked. So we need some out of the box thinking and some new ideas in order to be able to respond to the pandemic, because we really can't just keep going on like we are now. Cases are up. Pretty soon we'll be headed for another lockdown if we don't get a handle on this one way or the other. How's that for timing?
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. On next to Ms. Korte.
Thank you, Julie. So first, in our response to COVID-19, we are in unknown territory. We are not prepared as a society to adequately defend ourselves against this novel virus. I think we are doing the best we can in isolation, social distancing, and I think we need to do a better job of wearing masks. The health experts tell us that with social distancing and wearing masks, that you can prevent about 85% of the transmission of COVID-19. And that's significant. And that would slow down the infection rate and then relieve our healthcare system from the hospitalizations and all the necessary equipment to support those hospitalizations. Economically, I believe that we have done a good job already, even before when COVID hit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. On next to Mrs. Klapp.
Well, there's a variety of things we have been doing and should do. You asked for specific plans. We have been communicating as much as we can to citizens about wearing masks, about social distancing, about washing their hands, what everybody else has been trying to communicate. But I think it's important that every council member and mayor does that so that we can model behavior. We should wear masks in public to tell people that this is important. And I have been doing that. I think it's also important when you talk about the health crisis situation. It is also a crisis among our older population. So some of the specific things I've been doing is volunteering at the Olinda Senior Center, handing out food to seniors as they are needing it throughout this pandemic. So I've taken some proactive action to try to do what I can to help out. And then on the financial side, the city received $29 million from the state, which we've discussed distributing throughout the community. We'll have another meeting on that, but that will go to community services, to businesses, to help even maintain some of our own facilities. So there's a variety of ways that we are going to be talking about this in the future. And it's important that we make sure that we really focus, though, on the community services side, because those are the people who really need it, the older population, homeless population, those people who are coming to our senior centers, our Vista del Camino Center. We've got to make sure that we fund enough programs that we are keeping people from being hungry and on the streets.
Thank you, Mrs. Klapp. Ms. Borowsky.
Thank you very much. I think what is missing is a plan. I think articulating a plan for and a strategy for reopening and regaining some sort of normalcy is really what I think people feel deprived of right now. Having said that, the plan is unknown. This is unprecedented. We are dealing with a situation that we have not confronted in my lifetime and most of our lifetimes, all of our lifetimes probably. And we are, we won't know until this is, a year or so, maybe more behind us, what the right answers were. I will tell you, I'm a firm believer in personal responsibility. I do think that anything that can stop the spread and mitigate the virus impact should be strongly encouraged. I think that at the state level and the county level, they have public health departments, so we should be, as mayor, I would be working very, very closely with both those agencies to get a message out to our citizens as to what to expect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Mr. Ortega. You're still muted.
Well, first of all, we must work in unison with the entire county, with the entire state. One bad example of that was that when bars and restaurants were closed in Phoenix and word got out that Scottsdale was wide open, why there was a rush of people to hit Old Town Scottsdale bars, and that generated and precipitated probably more health problems in our entire valley. So we have to look at both the partnerships that we have locally and adhere to all the Maricopa County Health Department criteria. I heard a train whistle.
A train is not a chime, Mr. Ortega. Keep going.
Okay, well, the most important thing we can do as mayor is lead by example. Example means having a strong connection with our schools, with our hospital community, with our businesses, and saying, if it takes masks to get back in business, that's what we want to do. We want Scottsdale to get right back in business. And we'll do whatever it takes. We'll take the measures, whatever it takes, in a positive way. It's no different than answering to OSHA if they said you have to have a hard hat in order to be on a construction site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. We're going on next to question 2. Before we continue, there are at least 2 people without their microphones muted in the audience. Would you kindly double and triple check that you have your microphones muted, everyone in attendance today? Thank
Julie,
you.
before you start, just a point of clarification. Mr. Ortega, the background noise you were hearing, Julie, is his mic is hitting the button of his lapel. He may wish to move it to the other ear or move the button. That's why you're hearing that background noise. And Julie, just for clarification for all the candidates, I do not start the timer till they're actually on the screen and start speaking to give them their full time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So on to question number 2. Penny, would you please? Question 2 asks, the current Scottsdale law enforcement use of force policy only includes de-escalation and use of force continuum and marginally addresses requiring all exhausting all alternatives before shooting and bans shooting at moving vehicles. Do you think these policies are sufficient? If yes, why? If not, what additional policies would you recommend? This question goes first to Ms. Korte. Ms. Korte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julie. I completely support our policies put forth by our Scottsdale police officers and by our administration, the police department administration. While some people were concerned regarding the Scottsdale Fashion Square incident a couple weeks ago that police were not present, they were shall we say, overcome. The numbers of people that showed were 5 times the number of police officers. Plus, you don't shoot looters, and that's a policy that I think is a good policy. We can replace goods that are stolen. We can repair buildings that are broken. We cannot replace lives. And I think that's an important concept, an important policy that we hold.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. Going next to Mrs. Klapp.
Yeah, I also support the policies that are used by our police department. I think there's some misconceptions by the public exactly what those policies are. And I know that the police chief and the police department are trying to better communicate some of the policies they've really established, because we've received letters from people that believe that the police use chokeholds, which they do not. And I would like to also point out that they are peace officers. They are not the Army. That is what the National Guard does. So they are meant to keep the peace. And that's the overall mission of our police department. And I think they're doing a good job of that. I also attended a forum just last week called the Bridges Forum that was hosted by the NAACP. It had a lot of Black leaders there, the NAACP. They lauded the Scottsdale Police Department for many of the policies that have been put in over the last few years to ensure that they are not overstepping their authority, and they lauded the police chief himself. So I believe that even the people that are involved in the efforts among even Black Lives Matter understand that our police department is trying to do the right thing and not overstepping their authority.
Thank you, Ms. Klapp. Turning next to Ms. Borowsky.
Thank you. I believe there is a wide range of options between the use of force, deadly force, and people feeling like nothing's been done to protect situations. And I think we have to make sure that residents and business owners feel protected. They feel, in the case that we just recently witnessed, we must feel like our police department is going to protect us. One option would have been to make a lot more arrests during that riot at Scottsdale Fashion Square. But a stand down in a situation like that is something that our citizens and business owners should not expect and should not accept. I fully support the police department and public safety, and I pledge to work with them to do what is needed to, hopefully there is no next time, but in the event there is, to make sure that we have a better approach to protecting property, business, and our citizens.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Mr. Ortega.
The most important event that occurred in public safety in Scottsdale occurred in 2005, when the city of Scottsdale actually acquired its own fire department. Up to that time, there was a contractor, Rural Metro. Once that happened, we actually had unified communications, and it should be known and noted that with the crisis that happened with the attack at our Fashion Square Mall, both the firemen and the police were fully engaged and on standby and reacting as professionally as we would expect. I have an interesting past because my father-in-law was the retired, he was a Scottsdale police chief. And it's nothing like having a father-in-law who is also in law enforcement. That gave me an amazing insight. Also, Rosemary's brother was a sergeant police officer. They gave me a remarkable insight. And actually, I believe that we should always remain loyal to provide the best training possible, best equipment, and always put them at the front.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Littlefield.
Well, police are a hierarchical paramilitary organization. And I can tell you from my experience in the military that the key to success for an organization like that is leadership. If you have good leaders, you'll have good policies, they'll ask for the resources they need, and you'll get a good result. And I believe we should leave the questions of how to police, how the officers should work, what equipment they need, what training they need to the professionals. None of us up here are law enforcement professionals, and we really shouldn't be telling the police how to do their job. Our job will be to monitor the result. If we don't like the result, then we change the leadership. So that's the distinction here. I think that for the most part, the Scottsdale Police Department has acquitted itself well, and I think it has good leadership, except for the other night at Fashion Square. That didn't work out so well, but I noticed the police department reacted quickly and got back in the saddle, and now they're starting to arrest some shooters. So based on that and the fact that nobody was killed or hurt, it counts as a success.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Turning next to question 3. Question 3, there seems to be a lack of agreement between the City Council and the citizens of Scottsdale on development issues. The DDC proposal and the recent Southbridge 2 issue are examples. How would you propose to ensure that the City Council and the citizens address these development issues together? For answers, we turn first to Mrs. Klapp.
Well, there's a couple of different questions there, but one would be that we do need to agree on a general plan. We haven't had one for almost 20 years. And I think in the course of the conversations about the general plan, some of these things that are concerning to people will come out. And so I think the discussion about a general plan is going to be a good thing over the course of the next year. But specifically, we've had to deal with height issues in the downtown area, and there is disagreement. However, I should point out that every one of the City Council and a unanimous vote among the City Council agreed that there should be 150-foot heights in certain areas of the downtown, and that was an agreement. Then when developers came and presented plans that included that height, then that's where the disagreement began. So we probably should revisit the discussion about this so that we have better understanding of what everybody's intention was. The problem is if you give 150-foot height to certain areas, you can't take it back because that's not allowed under state rules. Thank you.
Turning next to Ms. Borowsky.
Thank you. I think we need to take a real serious look at what we're doing, especially in the downtown and the Old Town area. We have to bring forward specific guidelines of what the citizens, what the council expects from developers in return for the granting of very significant entitlements, which is the 150-foot, for example, or density, et cetera, whatever the proposal is. There must be a schedule of what's given back to the community. We need to ensure that these projects that are getting approved are sufficiently parked, they have sufficient parking for their density. We need to make sure that the infrastructure can support these projects. This question touches on 3 items on my reform agenda. That is the direct appointment of planning and zoning commission members, districting, taking a close look at districting, and the third, establishing neighborhood advisory panels to participate in these discussions. Overall, it is all about citizen engagement. We need to bring people into the process. They need to count on their, where they buy their home, it will be preserved and protected.
Turning next to Mr. Ortega.
Well, the relationship of city council and businesses and citizens was fractured before the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was fractured beginning with the failure to have a general plan. City council dialogue is required, it's not optional. And when the city council failed to have that dialogue, they went off on their own about 10 years ago and continued to let's just say, not follow our statutes and even the growing smarter criteria. What's happened is the city council got further and further away from the people. I intend to bring us back and listen to keep us together as a community. What they approved is basically 6 to 12-story buildings, which would create such a heat island in Scottsdale. You would never recognize what Scottsdale is, has, or will be. This heat island can't be replaced by more trees being planted, and it's totally against and contrary to what every Scottsdale citizen was expecting of their government. That's why I'm saying we must adhere to the principles of our general plan, which we adopted in 2002, and that is the only valid one. All these other machinations have created really the discontent.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Turning next to Mr. Littlefield.
Well, this is exactly the issue that caused me to run for the office of mayor back in January. And it would have been the overriding issue if the COVID-19 pandemic had not started. There's really no point in citizens giving feedback to the city council if the majority is not going to listen to it. And that's what's happened here on 420, the Desert Discovery Center, and on Southbridge. On the 420, the Desert Discovery Center was immensely unpopular. The council majority decided to go ahead with it anyway. And the only reason that was prevented was that the citizens of Scottsdale had to do an initiative, which I supported. In fact, I'm the only one up here who supported that. They had to do an initiative to put it on the ballot to prevent commercial development in the preserve. Southbridge was another example. That was something that was immensely unpopular. And once again, city council majority supported it until the citizens went out and in 28 days got 17,000 signatures. To put it on the ballot. And then of course, the city council majority went right ahead and canceled that, cut the ground out from under the referendum because they were afraid of what the result was going to be. So city council majority is clearly not listening. We don't need many more committees. We don't need any more task forces. What we need is to elect a city council majority that will actually listen to what the voters are saying and follow their direction. And that candidate for mayor is me.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Turning last to Ms. Korte.
Thank you. You know, Scottsdale was built on citizen visioning and citizen engagement. And that goes back to the 1960s in the STEP forums, Scottsdale Town Enrichment Program. And for 2 to 3 years, our citizens met and defined what Scottsdale was going to be in the next 30 years. The same thing happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, that our citizens came together in a visioning process to define what Scottsdale was going to be. That's what we have not done since the 90s. So in 20 years, we have failed to bring our citizens together. The general plan is not that mechanism. So I believe, and I will move forward with a Scottsdale Conversation 2050 that brings together anyone that wants to be a part of a long-term conversation on the future of Scottsdale, and that it's an inclusive process, and comes back with bringing our community back together with conversation, because conversation does make change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. On to question number 4. Penny, would you please? Question 4. Do you believe that Scottsdale's budget is sustainable, and why or why not? Do you support Resolution 11124, which proposes increasing sales tax by 0.15% to provide funds for transportation improvement projects and operations and related costs? Do you support Resolution 11092, which authorizes the issuance and sale of, what is it, $350 million in general obligation bonds? Please explain your position.
May I recommend that we give the candidates just another few minutes to read that? It's a pretty long question, Julie, if you don't mind.
Of course. And then candidates, when you're ready, we'll turn first to Ms. Borowsky.
All right, we are ready. I will start the timer as soon as Ms. Borowsky is. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that Ms. Borowsky can start.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was on the City Council during the Great Recession, 2008 to 2012. And during that period of time, I worked very hard, led the charge to come in and establish the Citizens Budget Commission. I believe that the city's budget was not sustainable back then. And we did a lot of work to make the city's budget leaner and sustainable moving forward. Unfortunately, the Citizens Budget Commission was disbanded, and I would look to immediately bring that back so that we have citizen engagement and people assisting us with studying the budget and making it much more lean and sustainable moving forward, which we're going to need to do. I understand the budget has expanded by about 33% since then, and we need to rein that in. And do we only have a minute? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're not done yet.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just finish up your sentence, ma'am.
I was saying that we need to rein that back in, make it much more sustainable, and moving into the future, keep it that way and not allow it to get all bloated back up the way it has been as we come out of through the economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Turning next to Mr. Ortega.
Well, I support the Prop 400. I believe that is the renewal coming up in 2025 for the transportation dollars that we need to keep, again, working in unison with all the cities and our transportation network. I was also the architect member for the School Facilities Board. We manage $420 million for new construction of 23 new schools, again, statewide. So I have that kind of county and city experience. As it pertains to our city revenues and sustainability, we did receive a life raft through the CARES program distributed by the governor, and it must handle our immediate needs and take some of the pressure off as far as providing protection to our citizens and our employees. So I would ask, and I believe the third question might have to do with the execution of the bonds, which were passed recently. I was in support of the city bonds. We passed Bond 2000 and also managed to have that through the tough times of September 11th when I served as councilman. So can we equate, and how we equate money has to always be based on level of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Littlefield.
Well, state law requires that every year our general fund budget be balanced, which means that we can't spend more than we take in. But our city budget may be balanced, but it's certainly unsustainable. And how do you know that? Well, you don't need to study. If you drive around, you'll see that our roads are mostly in a state of disrepair. Well, think about this now. Why is it that an affluent community like Scottsdale, second most affluent community in the valley after Paradise Valley, can't keep up with road repair? Even worse, when the bonds were being proposed last year, the staff came and they said Scottsdale has $800 million in unfunded infrastructure needs. Once again, how does a city like Scottsdale, an affluent city like Scottsdale, get $800 million in the hole? Well, the answer is the current city council majority has not made all these big, tall, dense developments that they've created, that they've approved, not making them pay for their impact on the city infrastructure. So yeah, we needed the bonds, we needed the sales taxes, but the problem here is we're asking current citizens to pay for the infrastructure needs that are being created by new development. We're literally asking Scottsdale citizens to pay for development that they don't want in the first place, because looping back to the question about the city council majority, not listening to what the citizens want. So we have to fix that.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Turning next to Ms. Korte.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a sustainable budget in Scottsdale. If you look at our assets, our total assets exceed $3 billion, and it's estimated that those assets depreciate about $100 million a year. Because of that, with a $280 million general fund budget, there's no way to maintain the capital needs of our city without going to the voters with one of the cheapest and most transparent means of financing capital improvement projects, and that's general fund bonds, and that's bond money. So yes, I've supported bond projects. I actually was co-chair of the 1989 bond measure back in 1989 that we built our giant stadium and our senior centers and more libraries. So yes, that is the best standard, that is best practice to fund capital improvement projects, is through a transparent, very inexpensive finance mechanism of bond measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. Turning last to Mrs. Klapp.
Well, the question mentions a 0.15% sales tax increase for transportation. That's already passed. It passed by the voters in 2018, and it was a 0.1% sales tax increase, not 0.15%. We decreased the amount before it went to the voters, and it was also limited to a 10-year period. So that passed last year, as well as the figure of 350 million that you showed was whittled down to 319 million by the capital improvement project subcommittee that I was on, and that went to the voters, and it was passed in large numbers by all the voters. So that's not really a proposal before us. We've already passed those things through the voters. So I chaired the Yes for Streets campaign, the 0.1% sales tax increase that was approved by voters. And you're starting to see that work now. You may still think that we are not dealing with transportation issues, but we have now $240 million that we're starting to spend that money on street improvements all over the city.
Thank you, Mrs. Klapp. Turning next to question number 5. Penny, would you please? Question 5. What is your plan to help ensure that marginalized groups such as Black, Indigenous, and people of color feel safe and included in our community, and that their voices are listened to as a matter of practice? This question goes first to Mr. Ortega. Mr. Ortega, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In my opening remarks, I mentioned how vital it is as a community, integrating with schools, talking with our partners at the school districts, the business community. It's vital that social justice and equal rights be afforded to everyone. And you know, this summer marks the 50th anniversary of the amendment for the women's right movement and equal rights movement. And I believe that extends to every religion, certainly every Indigenous people, and everyone to look at each other regardless of sexual preference and look at each other as human beings. And that's what I will encourage as mayor. I believe I have a special voice. I have been engaged with the community at the school level and at the city level. The Office of Dialogue is active, but I believe that the Erase Hate program that we initiated and that started at the steps of Saguaro High School will be reenacted. I'll be a leader for that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Turning next to Mr. Littlefield.
Well, I don't believe that Scottsdale is an unwelcoming community for either minorities or for LGBT or for various nationalities. I think just the opposite is true. And it's interesting to me, in the time I've been involved in Scottsdale politics and the time I was on the city council, Scottsdale probably spends more effort in terms of trying to improve human relations than any other city its size. So I think we always need to be vigilant. Our police department, we need to make sure they're treating everybody equally, but I would say right now they are. I don't believe that there's any indication that our police department is discriminating against people based on their color or on their national origin or their race. So you always have to be vigilant. There's always room for improvement, but I don't believe that Scottsdale is a bad community in that respect right now.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. On next to Ms. Korte.
Thank you, Julie. So I believe this question really refers to the messages that we've heard the last month from efforts and marches of the Black Matters. And I am one that really believes that whether you call it racism or you call it systemic discrimination or unintentional bias, that yes, it does exist in Scottsdale. I think it exists everywhere. I think it exists, it's a human condition. Racism has been a part of the human experience from the beginning of reported time. Our oldest texts document racially motivated wars and violence. So what do we do about that? Well, we first start talking about it. And I think that's the most important thing is conversations do make a difference. Conversations matter. And we create, whether that's through the Human Relations Commission, that we create a real community broad conversation around unintentional bias in whether it's within the city of Scottsdale or in the workplace, or how we deal with each other on the sidewalk and in traffic. So that's my proposal is a unintended bias task force that is community broad.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. On next to Mrs. Klapp.
Well, I think you have to take action and you have to call out racism when you see it, not just have a conversation or a task force. If it happens, you've got to recognize it and call it out. And we had an incident just a few days ago at a rally where unfortunately a councilman made a comment that was racist, and people are sending me thousands of emails related to this about how they are angry and upset about this, and I agree with them. So I am the only councilman and the only mayoral candidate who has actually suggested that that councilman really consider resigning from his position because of the remarks he made. These people will not let this go, and I think rightly so. And I think you have to take action, call it out when you see it, and get in and make sure that people understand that you don't agree with it or you are complicit. And I also mentioned I've attended a forum with Black leaders and the NAACP about a week ago. I'm invited to another one in 2 weeks just because of this issue. And I intend to go there as well. I think those kind of discussions are needed. We don't have to set up a task force. People are already acting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Last to Ms. Borowsky.
Thank you. No member of the Scottsdale community should be or should it be tolerated that they're treated insignificantly. Fortunately, when I was on the council, that was not an issue that came up. I can't recall an instance, and it certainly was, if there was an instance, isolated instance, it was not with any frequency. And I do believe that we need to work on the image of that. If there's a perception of that, we would have to, certainly address that. The Human Relations Commission can work with the council to do that. But no one should be treated as if they're insignificant or marginalized. I think that you work on engagement, you bring people, citizens into the discussions that are present, including this one, and you work as a community. As mayor, I will work with the community and residents to ensure that their voices are being heard. And if we identify a problem with that, then it's dealt with.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Those are the 5 questions that will be posed to every single candidate, meaning that we turn next to our grab bag questions. The League of Women Voters has prepared 5 grab bag questions for the candidates this afternoon. And while in the green room, the candidates were randomly assigned a number 1 through 5 that corresponds with a question. Before this moment, neither myself nor the candidates know what will be asked and to whom. Each candidate will have no longer than 2 minutes per question, and there will be no rebuttal offered during the grab bag time. I will begin with question number 1, which goes to Ms. Borowsky. Question 1, what is your stance on initiating or supporting an ordinance that bans discrimination in housing based on sexual orientation?
I believe enacting legislation is important if we identify an issue there. It is currently federal law that you can't discriminate in housing. I think that it is certainly an issue that if it's identified as being something that needs to be addressed, we can take a look at that. Based on the information I know, I don't believe that is an issue that comes up regularly in Scottsdale and not something that the city would need to enact an ordinance about. But going back to my earlier point, no discrimination should be tolerated in Scottsdale. And if it's identified, it needs to be addressed and certainly dealt with.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Back in the green room, Ms. Korte was assigned question number 2. Penny, would you please? Question 2, do you support using taxpayer funds to subsidize private-public partnerships for private sector investments, such as buildings, stadiums, promoted events, etc.? Would you please explain? Ms. Korte, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I do. We have made Scottsdale the way it is by using private public sector funds. Let's look at Westworld. Westworld is built with private public funds. primarily through our bed tax dollars. We can look at the Museum of the West. Our bed tax dollars, public funds have been used to supplement the building of Museum of the West. Same with performing arts, same with so many of the events that we have here in Scottsdale, from the canal convergence to the many celebrations of Native Americans in the Civic Plaza. Those are all supported through our bed tax dollars, and those are public funds. That's what makes Scottsdale special. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. Turning next to Mr. Littlefield, who was assigned question number 3. Question 3, how are the demographics of Scottsdale changing? Is there an impact on housing types and costs in Scottsdale? Mr. Littlefield, you have the floor.
Okay, let me unmute here. There we go. Well, there's been a lot of misinformation about this. The demographics of Scottsdale are not changing as much as many people have claimed. Scottsdale is still a more affluent community than average in the Valley. We're still an older community, more on the average compared to the communities in around us. Now, there's some people who have been using the idea that the demographics are changing to use as an excuse for development, which most people in Scottsdale don't want. But if you look at the actual numbers, you'll find the percentages of people in various age groups have remained constant in Scottsdale for at least the last 20 years. So the idea that Scottsdale is somehow getting younger or less affluent simply isn't true. It's remained pretty much the same. I would also make the point that people in Scottsdale, whatever their age group, yeah, there's different demographics, there's different desires for different demographics, but mostly those people sort themselves out based on what kind of things are offered in Scottsdale. So Scottsdale has always been a bedroom community, a single family home community predominantly. And when people want that, they move to Scottsdale. And that's where we made ourselves. If you look at the properties down on McKellips Road, the oldest properties in Scottsdale, the oldest homes, which are now seeing a renaissance, which are actually being refurbished. If you drive around down there, at least before you did before the pandemic, you see that a lot of those homes are pretty well built, are being refurbished and changed, updated, but they're still there. They're still single family homes with a yard, so you can have your dog and your 2.5 kids. So I think the idea that Scottsdale is somehow morphing into a different kind of community simply is not true.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Turning next to Mrs. Klapp, who drew question number 4. Question 4. There are not enough preserve tax funds remaining to allow acquisition of all the remaining land within the voter-approved McDowell-Sonoran Preserve boundary. Should the City Council determine if citizens want to complete the preserve, and if so, how to pay for it? If not, how do you propose utilizing the remaining and future dedicated preserve funds? Mrs. Klapp, the floor is yours.
I think this would be a great opportunity to ask the citizens what we should do with the money, because there is not really enough money left over to buy much of any land. All the land that has been identified that is not in the preserve now is very expensive. And so our chances of being able to bid on that land with a state land department auction are probably not good. And so with the money that's left over, we could go back to the taxpayers and ask them how that money could be spent. It could be spent on maintenance of the preserve. It could be, we could ask a question. I'm not saying what the question would be, but we could ask a question that, do you want to have an additional tax to buy more land? That could be asked because we don't have enough now. and also, just what do you think the money should be used for? And thirdly, if you don't want it spent on anything, you want whatever leftover money is there to be returned to the taxpayers. So there's options that we could present to the voters. They decided to tax themselves for this money. We've been able to buy a large portion of all the land identified for the preserve. And so what money is left over is now at a point where we have to decide if taxpayers really want us to do more with it. Even if we decide to spend it on maintenance of the preserve, we have to go back and ask for that, because the questions that were originally posed to the voters did not include using any of the funds for maintenance of the preserve. It was only for capital needs. So we really need to ask the voters what they want.
Thank you, Mrs. Klapp. Turning last to Mr. Ortega, who drew question number 5. Question 5, what are your plans to improve public transportation in and out of Scottsdale, as well as congestion within city limits? Mr. Ortega, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We are thank you. We are at a turning point in Scottsdale. What's happened is the council and the incumbents have been pushing Scottsdale to 6 to 8 to 12-story buildings. That does not fit our transportation grid. It doesn't fit our infrastructure grid. You realize that in order for Southbridge 2 to get built, they would have to build a new sewer line 2.5 miles long. And under the plan that was proposed by council, we would have 20 Southbridge in that area, in 1 mile radius. That's a disaster and shows how out of control the council had been, both on level for transportation and then the congestion and gridlock that will bring. Those decisions were not authorized by the people. They weren't authorized by General Plan 2001, which was the last approved general plan coming from the people. So the mayor and council majority went way off the guardrail, and we have to get back to what COVID is teaching us. It is teaching us nationally that we should not be living in 12 and 15 and 30-story buildings. We should not be crowded in light rail, which again has many health risks. It's actually telling us that the open spaces and the low scale profile that the world is now going to be looking at as the correct answer versus high density, it's actually the Scottsdale model. It's the model that we've been living with, where our families have grown and our schools have prospered. It's not packing in all of these tall buildings. As an architect, I know I can press a button and change a building from 20 stories to 50 stories if I wanted to, but that's not Scottsdale. That's the Scottsdale I plan to protect. We don't want all this gridlock in transportation and stress to our infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. We turn last to part 4 of our program this afternoon, closing remarks. We will close out this afternoon with a final closing question, during which time the candidates will have one final opportunity to share their vision for the city. Each candidate will have 1 minute for this final question, and there will be no rebuttal offered. The closing question this afternoon is, what is your long-term vision for Scottsdale? How does this vision reconcile the historic moniker, the West's most western town, with the rapid urban expansion of high-density commercial and residential developments? What will you do to assess and address what the majority of residents want their city to be? The closings this afternoon will be in alphabetical order by last name, which means that Ms. Borowsky, you are first. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julie. This is the defining question, I think, for this election. I believe the residents feel like the city has gone off in a direction that is not good for our future. It is we're known for a tourism draw. That's a significant part of our tax revenue. That's why people move here. That's why people move their businesses here. And that's why the Valley residents flock to Scottsdale for entertainment. We have a very unique community, and we have to keep it that way. Historically, it's a resort style community. We have to keep that low slung nature, the open space in the north part of our town. And I think it's incumbent upon us moving forward to take a real close look at districting so that people from all areas of our city feel like they have a voice in how we're going to move forward in the future. Of course, we have high buildings in downtown already, so that cat is out of the bag. And some of them are done incredibly well. Some of them not so great in the last several years. And we have to keep our focus on what keeps Scottsdale special and keeps us as a draw. And that is high expectations and high standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Turning next to Mrs. Klapp.
Thank you. I think we have to honor our history as well as look to the future. At least that's my vision. We need to combine those two. And there was a discussion of mottos some time ago. We've been the most western town for a long time. It's still a great motto, and I think we still need to honor it. That's one reason why I didn't want to change our city flag and take the fucking Bronco off the flag, because I think we need to honor our Western heritage. But I do think that we are more like, this is where the old West meets the new West. It's looking back, but looking forward as well. Embracing historic preservation, adaptive reuse, but also understanding that we must build amenities in the city that are going to be what the residents want in order to increase the income that's coming into the city in order to provide the services that we need. We don't want to raise taxes, so we have to understand that development, economic activity, providing amenities all create the activity that we want here, brings tourists in, it makes residents happy, and it keeps our taxes low. So, again, we must consider the past. It's extremely important. We can't disregard it, but we must understand amenities keep taxes low and development keeps taxes low. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Klapp. Turning next to Ms. Korte.
Thank you. Scottsdale it's a great place to live and learn and work and fulfill dreams. We are a very diverse city from north to south, about 38 miles north to south, and the rise in elevation is a good 3,000 feet. Our urban character is our southern region. Our suburban character is our midtown, and then our rural area is North Scottsdale. And that's the way it's going to be. That's the way it's been planned for. What we need to do, and I've mentioned it before, is that we need to create a citizen-driven long-term vision. And that is all around Scottsdale Conversations 2050 and bringing a very inclusive group of people for a long-term conversation around the future of Scottsdale. That's what we've been lacking. We were built on a citizen vision process from the 60s to the 90s, and the last 20 years we have not provided that opportunity for our citizens. Conversation makes a difference, and leadership matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Korte. Turning next to Mr. Littlefield.
Well, I believe that the urbanization and densification of Scottsdale has gotten way out of hand, and it's gone way too far. I further believe that the citizens and voters of Scottsdale agree with me, and that's why I'm asking them to vote for me for mayor. What we've created is a situation now where we're basically trying to turn, not me, city council majority, is basically trying to turn Scottsdale into a pale copy of any town USA, and they're rolling over the things that are distinctive about Scottsdale's special character, and they're doing so in a way that not only hurts our quality of life, but it's costing us money because that's how we got $800 million in the hole. And what I think is ironic about this is that the COVID-19 pandemic has made it clear that there's not going to be as much need for tall, dense buildings anyway, regardless. Big companies like Google and Facebook are sending their employees home. So they're not going to need to be building office space. They're not going to be needing to give their employees cubicles because their employees are going to be at home. And now, because of the 5G and all the other increases in bandwidth, people don't have to live anywhere near where they work. They can live anywhere on the planet that has internet access and get to their job. So I think it's time to put the brakes on this and return to the vision of Scottsdale that was low scale, low density.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Last to Mr. Ortega.
Thank you. Well, my family came to the Arizona Sonoran Desert because before Arizona was even a territory. I came to Scottsdale. I've lived here 41 years. I've lived the Scottsdale dream. I know what Western town means. I know what Arizona means and why it is such a magnet. But the relationship that City Hall has had the last 10 years is a fractured one. All of my opponents had the opportunity when they were in office to succeed, to go out and listen and get a general plan, because a general plan has to come from the people and it directs the leaders on what to do. They did the opposite. They could not get the general plan done, and they went on by themselves to dictate from the top to the people. Unfortunately, this has resulted in Southbridge, where I repeatedly asked the council, look, this does not fit and it does not work. And I did not get answers back from the council incumbents. Not one letter did they come back and say, you know, maybe you have a point. Strangling the canal and Fifth Avenue just won't work. But what I'm saying is understanding where you have to respect our core city, our core values. They're already in the general plan. Tomorrow, the city will have an open house for the general plan. It will be wide open for people's input. We're not going to wait for another offer of a 2050. We're going to be able to start tomorrow and work to respect Scottsdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. And thank you to all of the candidates for your participation, and to you, the audience, for your attention. And again, thank you to the League of Women Voters for organizing this event and the National Council of Jewish Women for helping sponsor it. It has been my pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon, and I will return the floor to Penny Sharon to close us out this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate all the work that you did to pull together this debate. Thank you, Ms. Korte. Thank you, Mrs. Klapp. Thank you, Ms. Borowsky. Thank you, Mr. Littlefield, and thank you, Mr. Ortega, for taking this Sunday afternoon off to work with the League of Women Voters to inform our voters and citizens. For a matter of data that might be of interest to you all, we had 205 attendees at this event at the highest point, and as late as now, we have 150. So in this 2 hours, we just lost about 50, and I've been monitoring Facebook, and we are looking at probably about 300 people. In this time of COVID, League continues to do the work that's part of its mission to inform the voters. So COVID or not, League continues a 100-year history of informing voters. We are fortunate to have amazing technology to bring this to all the citizens of Scottsdale. We wish all our candidates and all our participants a wonderful Sunday afternoon. Please be safe, stay healthy, and yay, Scottsdale.